Well, greetings and salutations, faithful viewers of the John Campea Show. I am your host for these 2 episodes of the Mailbag, Robert Meyer Burnett. And you cheeky people, you know we have a spoiler-free policy on this show, except, of course, when I inadvertently spoil something live during the show. That's me. It can't be you. So in this version, or in these 2 episodes of the Mailbag, we have removed overtly spoiler questions. You try and sneak something in on us, but we're on to you. This is amazing. I was able to shift myself through the space-time continuum and go from May 11th to May 12th to do another episode of the John Campea Show Mailbag. And as you all know, during the John Campea Show, we accept your super chats live and we read them on the show. But we are open for business 24/7 at that tip link right below, and you can send us any question, query, give us an opinion, whatever you want to do, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And if we deem it appropriate, either I will read it, John will read it, the 2 of us will read it on the Mailbag. And this is the Mailbag for May 12th, 2022. We're going to start with, who are we going to start with? I don't know, Lucky. We are starting with Lucky. Hello, crew. When I was 9 years old, a blurry movie came on my TV, and I kept having to move the antennas around to try and get a clearer picture. That movie was called Flash. And since that day, I've been hooked on sci-fi films. It forever changed my life. You know what? Lucky. You were lucky because I actually saw Flash Gordon in the theater. 1980. You had Empire Strikes Back coming out in May. I believe Flash Gordon came out in December of 1980. What a year. But I love Flash Gordon. I mean, my God, Timothy Dalton is Baron. And of course, Brian Blessed is Voltan. So good. And no one was better than Ornella Muti, one of the most gloriously beautiful women ever to appear in any movie ever. I stand by that till my dying day. A good movie, Lucky, to get you in to becoming a lifelong film fan. Love it. Chloe Fanning sends in a tip and says, with Avatar, The Way of Water coming out, I must say that my dad is excited to see it. And he will hardly even watch a movie outside of it being a Western. I still haven't seen the first one, but my dad liked it. I wonder if Chloe goes on. Well, let me tell you something, Chloe. You know why? In a way, it kind of does have a Western vibe to it. There's definitely Western mythic archetypes in that movie. And I can understand that. I mean, people always say it's Fern Gully mixed with Dances with Wolves. I think it's a very classical tale, and I really loved it. It's a combination of sort of classic Western or classic storytelling tropes mixed with heady sci-fi and some great sci-fi concepts, sci-fi action on an alien planet. I'm a huge fan of Avatar, and there's a reason why your dad likes it. I've told the story about how when I took my mom to it 13 years ago, she'd never seen a 3D IMAX movie before, and my mom is a very unimaginative, pragmatic woman. And it's not a criticism, it's just a fact. And when it was over, her eyes big as saucers. I'd never seen my mother look like this before. And she made it a point when I was growing up, she would take me to all the big movies. But when it was over, she just looked at me with these eyes as big as saucers, and she just said, "How did they do that?" And I'm like, "Well, Mom, it's the magic of the movies. What can I say?" Steven says, "Hi, John. I enjoyed Doctor Strange 2, and I like the revelation that in our dreams we see our multiversal selves. I don't know about you guys, but my multiversal self gets up to some weird shit." Laugh out loud. Love the show. You know what? I kind of, if that would, let's say that's true. You know, let's say our dreams really are showing us our multiversal selves. I kind of like the idea that my multiversal self sometimes gets up to a lot more shenanigans than I ever get up to. And all kinds of shenanigans, not just, the filthy, you know what I'm saying? But I like that idea, like that our multiversal selves are leading our best lives. So it's our multiversal selves that we can actually aspire to be. So we aspire to be different versions of ourselves. I kind of like that. I like that in the movie too. This one comes from Michael Jones. Michael Jones says, somebody wrote in to Tuesday's show and said when actual box office numbers came out, Doctor Strange 2 dropped from 450 million to 411 worldwide. That is not true. Estimates were 185 million domestic, 265 international for a total of 450 million. Actual was 187 domestic and 262 international for a total of 449. So, yeah, I thought that was a little off. But I'm glad you pointed that out, Michael. You know, these things are important. We got to get these statistics correct. So thanks for writing in. I appreciate that. And thank you for supporting the channel. Spud Queen sends in a tip and says, I am suspicious, John. Is the person in the mocap suit pictured the unannounced cameo that James Gunn teased for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3? Not sure the timeline would add up, but that's my guess. Thanks, and bring on the filthy. Spud, I can honestly tell you it is not. I think that's a good guess. If it was close, I might even tell you, but it's way off. I will say this. I would imagine that when this picture when it's finished and you don't see the mocap suit anymore, it's going to put a big smile on your face to actually see this. Of course, they might have done reshoots and who knows, but it's worth the wait and we'll never tell. Turner sends in a tip and says, my takeaway from the end of Loki, granted it's been a while, is that because the TVA exists outside of time, when the sacred timeline began to branch out to form the multiverse, it didn't happen linearly. It happened at all points of time simultaneously. I like that idea. I mean, here's the thing. So there are many different branches in time. The question that I have is, I don't remember, but is that supposed to be the multiverse? Or like in the 616 universe, can you go to different points in the 616 universe that are just different? Or are we actually going to a different point in the multiverse? I need more clarification. I'm always talking about the cosmology of the MCU. I mean, how do the gods work with everybody? Do the Celestials control everything? Like, do the Egyptian gods have to call the Celestials if they want to make a move on Earth? I don't know. I think we need this defined. Because even I said in Loki, I liked Loki, but I thought it really pushed the edges of the MCU. It started to strain credulity. Did I still believe it? I don't know. It's hard to say. But I think we need to know, Turner. Great analysis, though, and you might very well be correct. Jerome says, would you consider Wanda's love for her kids who are not real any different than how fans love fictional characters to the point they make questionable decisions out of that love? Jerome, that is a fair point. And I think you might absolutely be correct, spot on with that. Like obviously everyone knows I love Star Trek. And growing up, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy were my heroes. And luckily I was able to meet Leonard Nimoy. But to me, in a way, Spock was a real person, in my mind, because I'd seen so many episodes of Star Trek, I'd read so many Star Trek novels, and those characters were so real to me that when Leonard Nimoy, more so because I never really met DeForest Kelley, but when Leonard Nimoy passed away, I really did feel a profound sadness. I cried, and I felt that I had lost a friend. And even though I wouldn't consider him a friend, I'd made a video tribute for him once, and then I'd been to his house and spoken to him. And I do feel like when William Shatner, God forbid, when he leaves this mortal plane, I will feel a profound sense of sadness. Of course, I do know him, but to me, there's something about Kirk and Spock that they were more real, knowing that the real guys who played them were still here. But I think we do, because, in our minds, especially when these characters inhabit so much of our lives and we spend so much time thinking about them, they are real. To a certain extent, they're real to us within our emotional states. I think they are real, if that makes any sense at all. Maybe it doesn't. But it's an interesting philosophical point to run around in your head. Wait, Turner. This is interesting. So this is one of two. Let me read this again, Turner. My takeaway from the end of Loki, granted it's been a while, is that because the TVA exists outside of time, when the sacred timeline began to branch out to form the multiverse, it didn't happen linearly. It happened at all points of time simultaneously, which would explain the characters in the past have mentioned the multiverse, because from their perspective, it always existed. However, from our perspective, we just witnessed the birth of the multiverse. Feige playing some four-dimensional chess, also. retcons. I mean, again, like I said, I really do think that we need some kind of clarification on all of this, because I'm not clear on it all. And I think I would like to be clear on it all. And it's frustrating to not know. But again, we need to understand the rules. Like any great science fiction, fantasy, or horror, any flight of fancy, narrative flight of fancy, I think it's really important that we understand how it works and what are the rules, because then the rules allow us to construct stories within that paradigm. And if you don't know the rules, it's very difficult to come to grips with all of it. So I think it's important that they do clarify it. At some point, I'm sure they will, but who knows? Mike G says, guys, I don't get it. I watched Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness twice last weekend. I loved every minute. A Sam Raimi horror comedy MCU entry that made the Jack Kirby fan in me die of ecstasy. How do people not like this? No Wolverine cameo? Give me a break. Mike G, you're a fan after my own heart. I agree with you. You know, speculation versus expectation that John's always talking about. I think that I thought it was a fine film, a handsome movie. And like you said, there's a lot to love about the film. And I really enjoyed it. Like I even said, I thought it was a minor entry in the MCU, and that it almost felt like a standalone movie, even though it was obviously connected through Wanda and to everything else. But it was, if Doctor Strange never told anybody that what happened, I mean, other than the people at Kamar-Taj and Wong, would it have any ramifications at all in the real world? I mean, yet. I think this is the beginning of things are brewing, things are percolating, whatever they are. But I think a good point you make there, that the Jack Kirby fan in you died of ecstasy, because it had a lot of Kirby-esque stuff in it, and there was a lot in it that I thought was quite good, and it was really imaginative. And you know, it was in a way, it was kind of a small movie that we wanted to be bigger, but it wasn't supposed to be Endgame. It was a story about Doctor Strange, and I think you're right. It was like a day in the life of Doctor Strange. I thought it was fine, and I had a great time with it. Breakneck pacing, a lot of fun, glorious romp, and like I said, it felt like a summer annual. Like you're reading your favorite comic, they do a giant-sized summer annual, bigger story. That's kind of what it felt like to me. We got a summer annual in May. I liked it. Jerome says, should characters who are vampires, werewolves, witches, or other supernatural creature be considered redeemable or unredeemable if their bad decisions were influenced by what they are, or does it depend on who they are as a person? Well, that's a good question. I mean, are you saying that, so if you're a vampire and you're a werewolf, and like once a month when you're a werewolf and the moon comes out and you end up taking someone's life, or if you're a vampire and you drink the blood of a human being, should you be held accountable for that because that's your nature? Well, I think you should. I mean, that's why we have to vanquish evil, I suppose. But I mean, look, you know, the Daywalker, Blade had to drink blood. I mean, obviously he wasn't going to kill anybody to do it because he was moral. But I do think that there is, you can't, just because something is the way it is, I don't know, do you absolve them of responsibility if they're going to hurt another human being? I mean, it's a good question, but I don't think that vampires should be absolved of guilt simply because they're doing what they have to do. Like a vampire has to, if you're a supernatural being and you drink someone's blood and kill another human being, you should be responsible and you should get vanquished, and that's why Blade will come for you. But it's a really interesting philosophical question. I mean, when you say bad decisions, I mean, is it a bad thing for a vampire to kill a person because they need to survive? I would say yes. And you have to hold them accountable. But that is an interesting, thought-provoking question, and I am there for it. Royce Freeman sends in a tip and says, if someone takes a job working for a show that does adult material, like Howard Stern or something, and they find it too offensive, can they make them change just to make them comfortable, or should they just leave the job? Well, Royce, I would say, look, if you go to work for Howard Stern, I mean, there's a movie about Howard Stern called Private Parts. I think you need to decide what it is that they're doing, and you have to decide like whether that's right for you. Like many of you know, if you've watched this show, I appeared in a pornographic parody of Star Wars XXX. I knew people that were making it. It's an X-rated movie. I wasn't going to appear in any X-rated sequences, though. They were literally recreating Star Wars stuff, and it was a parody. And they asked me if I wanted to be in it. Now, I think there's a lot of people that might object. They just object to pornography in general. But for me, it was kind of a fun thing. You know, I got to go be on the sets of the Rebel base and the Millennium Falcon, and I got to fly an X-wing in the movie. And for me, it was just play acting. But did I make a moral decision? I suppose I did. But I knew what I was doing. And I wasn't going to be like, listen, people, if you want me to do this, you can't be making an X-rated film. And I think that it's really a question. It's an individual question. And I think it's up to that person. If you go into an environment and you know what you're getting into, you can't then regret it or ask them to change something because you have second thoughts. That isn't fair. So it really comes down to the individual making a decision when they decide to do whatever it is they decide to do. You can't expect Howard Stern to change what he does based on the whims of his workers. And I think that's what being an adult is to understand and accept those choices that you've made. And if they're the wrong choices, if you find out that, look, you know what, I find Howard Stern objectionable in some way, shape, or form, then you just leave. You cannot expect the world to change for you. Now, it's a whole different thing if you're witnessing some kind of injustice in the workplace. If somebody's doing something that is inappropriate or offensive within a work environment, then you can bring it up. But if you object to the existential nature of what Howard Stern is doing, that's on you, man. You just have to go find another job. That's what I think. Nathan Namila, I think. Rob, the man, the myth, the legend. Jonathan, well, if you're going to call me the man, the myth, and the legend, who am I to object? So thank you for that. I appreciate that. That's very kind of you. Hey, Rob, with our love of physical media, do you think there will be physical discs beyond 4K movies like 8K and beyond? I was wondering what discs should collectors get before they're out of print. Thanks for everything, Rob. Jonathan, I think 4K is the end of the road. I really do. And the way I think about it is when I'm buying discs, it's so interesting when I get a 4K disc, especially if something that, like, I'll give you an example. When I bought Die Hard, I love Die Hard, the first Die Hard. I bought my first copy of Die Hard on Laserdisc. I want to say the movie came out in the summer, and I was at USC when I got the Laserdisc. It either came out close to Christmas or just after the New Year, and I really enjoyed it. But those are my dogs barking. I really enjoyed the disc, but it didn't look so great. Jan de Bont's cinematography is very hard to duplicate on home video, and even though it looked great on Laserdisc, it was still smeary. Not until the 4K disc of Die Hard did it look correct. It never looked right. I owned it on Laserdisc. I owned it on DVD, but I don't think it finally looked great on 4K. So in my own mind, I'm like, this is it. This is the end of the road for Die Hard. I can't even tell you how many times I've bought Star Wars on physical media. I had bootleg tapes of it on videotape. Then I bought the regular videotapes over and over and over again. Then I had the laser discs, and I had the THX versions of the laserdiscs, the letterbox versions, and I bought it over and over again until I got the 4K discs, and I know that's the end of the road. That is going to be the end of physical media, 4K. And we can't see much beyond 4K with our own eyes. I mean, the resolution of 8K is great, but it's not going to change. I can see gaming is going to make use, and there's going to be commercial uses and entertainment uses for larger and larger resolutions. But movies are going to end on 4K, and so I'm making a point of buying as many 4K discs as I can of my favorite movies. But it's a good question. A good question. Max Movie Suck. Hi, John and crew from the UK. Are you excited for life after... Oh, wait a minute. Hi, John and crew from the UK. Are you excited for the Life After Megaforce documentary coming soon? This documentary will win even in the 80s. Keep up the good work and support physical media. Max Movie Suck. Let me tell you something. I had a Megaforce poster on my wall, and it was a cool poster. It looked like a patch, and it said deeds, not words on it. And, it had Ace, it had Bostwick, dressed in his gold lame with the beard and the hair and the bandana. I would watch anything to do with Megaforce. I think it's a terrible movie. John loves it. I think it's a terrible movie. I don't love it, but I did see it in the theater when it first came out in the summer of 1982. It's going to be 40 years old this summer. Can you believe that? But if there's a documentary about it, man, I'm there for that. I didn't know somebody was making it. I've got to look that up. Life After Megaforce. And you know what? The question is there life after Megaforce? I don't know. I don't know if my life's ever been the same, but I'll watch it. Mike G says, also, no one seems to bring up the very prominent House of M sigil on Wanda's costume. Unless I'm wrong, that doesn't stand for Maximoff. Look, I'm still waiting. You know what my theory was? That Wanda, it was Wanda who banished all the mutants in the past, and we just don't know it yet. I mean, maybe that's not the case. Maybe that isn't exactly what happened, but I tend to think that's what happened. I tend to believe that, but we will find out. I was hoping it'd be in Multiverse of Madness. It was not, and I can understand why. It was overstuffed as it was, so we shall see. Jonathan Namila comes back again and says, hello, John and crew. Do you know when the new Yorgos Lanthimos short film Slent movie Bleat will be released worldwide? I do know it was released at the Greek National Opera House, but not to worldwide audiences yet. Do you know Poor Things is still coming? Bring on the Filthy. I like him as a filmmaker. I don't know about this short movie that you're talking about. Is it Slent? Is it silent movie? His silent movie Bleat? Is that what you meant? I don't know anything about it, but I will watch any of his movies. So yeah, I just don't know this movie. Jonathan Emila goes on to say, hello, John and crew. Hi, Ray. Chef Pleasure Ray. I was wondering if you make a Chef Pleasures cookbook. Ray, we need a Chef Pleasures YouTube channel, Cooking with Chef Pleasures. Ray, have you ever thought of working in wardrobe and films? Bring on the Filthy. You know what? I can't speak to that. I don't know if Ray would do that, but I'm telling you, I think if Ray did a cooking show on the John Campea YouTube channel, it would be hilarious. So I'm all about that. I am totally all about that. I will ask Ray for you. Obviously, he is not in earshot, but when next time I talk to him, I'm going to go like, yeah, man, we should totally do that. I'm definitely down. Orange Hand sends in a tip and says, networks like HBO follow a subscription model with no ads like streamers, and yet some of their shows last several seasons, whereas streamers pull the plug after 2 or 3 seasons. Why is there such a different approach despite similar business models? Well, I think that with HBO, their thought is if the show is great, it drives not only their subscriptions, but their business around the world. And HBO knows how valuable it can be for a show like Game of Thrones because they put it out on video. They do other things with their shows. They don't just stream them on HBO. I've got a Game of Thrones box set. They merchandise their shows, whereas Netflix doesn't do that. They don't have any other use for their shows other than streaming them on their platforms. So there isn't a larger ecosystem that those shows exist in. And these HBO shows, they become part of the zeitgeist. So people will wear Tony Soprano t-shirts, or they'll buy a box set of The Sopranos on disc or something. And they're willing to exploit their programming outside the realm of only HBO, whereas the other streamers aren't doing that. Like Netflix, they've talked about, well, maybe we'll put some of our movies in the theaters, but their business model, that it has nothing to do with what they're making. A theatrical window, yeah, okay, they'll make some box office, but they don't care. What they want is that subscription money because that is their only source of income. Also, HBO is part of a much bigger company. They're part of Warner Discovery. So there's a lot more, there's more going on with HBO shows within that company. Netflix is only Netflix. They're not part of any larger company, so there's no way that their shows get exploited more. It's actually a really good question. Jonathan Namila says, hey, John and crew, do you know what is happening with the live-action Disney Gargoyles movie? Will there be a live-action Thundercats movie? Is the He-Man movie still being made? Will there be a Thundercats crossover movie with He-Man live-action? Well, Jonathan, I have to say, John showed it to me just the other day. We looked at this. They used clips from other movies and they made a trailer for a Thundercats film, a live action film. And it's pretty interesting to look at. I mean, you can see what movies they took footage from. And it's really interesting. It's fun. But I do not think there's going to be a Thundercats movie. There might be. I could be proven wrong. In this day and age, nothing surprises me anymore. And if they do make a He-Man movie, I don't know what the status is of the live action He-Man movie. I think it'd be great if they made one. I think it could be very, very cool. I mean, obviously, the last time there was a live-action He-Man movie was 1987. So what was that, 35 years ago? So maybe this year there will, in fact, be a live-action He-Man movie going into production. But I don't know. But I do think, unfortunately, you won't see a live-action He-Man movie and Thundercats movie do a crossover. Unless you'd have to make like 2 or 3 of them. They'd all have to be very successful before that were to ever happen. And with the Gargoyles movie, I would love to see that. I'd love to see a live-action Gargoyles movie. I thought that was great. Love Gargoyles. I don't think we're going to see that, unfortunately. Stones and Crones sends in a tip. Star Trek. Rob is dead on. John is not. Sometimes I just have to sit back and allow the audience to decide. Stones and Crones, thank you. I know I'm right. Teach, don't preach. Subtle is always better. But alas, Hollywood is all about the hammer, not the feather these days. Also, yeah, I mean, the thing about, here's what I don't like about the didactic, preachy nature of of Star Trek. All the great stories give you something to think about, to ponder, to roll over in your mind. Nowadays, like Star Trek is telling us what we are supposed to think. And that's different. Star Trek and great science fiction, great stories present you a tale. And things happen in the tale, and a great story allows the tale to unfold, and you should glean meaning from that story. But it doesn't tell you what that meaning is. Great storytelling doesn't have to do that. It allows the story itself to tell you. And I think one of the big problems that I have with modern Star Trek is it's really preachy. When you do stunt casting, like they brought in Mae Jemison, who was one of the first black female astronauts, and put her on Star Trek, that was cool because she's Mae Jemison and she broke through and in the field of being an astronaut. And it was pretty neat when she appeared on Star Trek. What wasn't cool was then to turn around and put a Democratic candidate, a politician like Stacey Abrams, and position her and show her as the president of the Federation because she's a divisive political figure in our current political landscape. And, she's a Democrat. And your audience, the thing about Star Trek is it has audiences on all sides of the aisle. Democrats, Republicans, people that are conservative, people that are liberal. Star Trek is a show that represents humanity. It's basically, it was a secular humanist show, really. But when you do things like stunt casting a Democratic politician in the role of a president, I mean, that serves to alienate your audience. And I don't think it's necessarily a good thing to do that. But the powers that be at Star Trek now think that is okay. I wouldn't have done that, like Stephen Hawking, the actual Stephen Hawking, the physicist, guested in an episode of Star Trek as himself. He was a holographic version of himself that Data was playing cards with Isaac Newton and Albert Einstein. Well, that was really cool. And I think anybody, no matter what side of the aisle you're on or whether you're conservative or liberal or whatever, you have to smile at that because Stephen Hawking isn't a political figure that can be divisive. So I think it works. But again, you're preaching, and I don't think Star Trek should do that. Great universal stories, the great stories, should be for everybody, I think. They allow you to bring your own sense of self into a story and think about it the way you want to think about it. And that's not to say that stories shouldn't try and tell you something of value, but that shouldn't be the only thing that they do. So, and you should be able to decide for yourself what meaning you can glean from the story that's being told. Alfonso sends in a tip and says, John, can we, our awesome, amazing community, start a Hot Toys Fund for the studio and then have Rob and Ray do unboxing for them, please? I'm all for that. But here's the problem. I would want to steal those Hot Toys figures and bring them home for myself. But I like the idea. John's going to Frankensons tonight. And yeah, how cool is that? He's going to go get probably a Hot Toy figure or two. Can't wait to see what he buys. Eric says, hey, John, I absolutely agree with you. The first episode of Strange New Worlds was fantastic. I honestly haven't been as excited for any Star Trek ever. I grew up watching the originals, but this just feels on another level, and I think we could be in for the best Star Trek series of all time. Well, Eric, I hope that whenever I see something new that they're making with the Star Trek name on it, so hope springs eternal. I mean, from your mouth to God's ears. Hopefully it'll be that good. Hopefully I will love it. Because it gives me no pleasure to dislike modern Star Trek. It really doesn't. I don't like it. And I'm highly critical in what I expect. Look, to me, with as much Star Trek as there has been, and for Star Trek to be here as long as it has debuted in, of course, September of 1966, Star Trek should be the pinnacle of great televised science fiction. I don't like seeing it retreading ground it's already trodden on. Like, tell first contact stories that aren't as good as other first contact stories that they've already told. And that's the only reason. I mean, I think Anson Mount's great, but for me, Star Trek lives and dies through the writing, and I want to see some really great science fiction character work on the show. And you know what? I hope they can do that. I want them to do that. I don't take any pleasure not liking Star Trek. I don't. Mike G says, also, the Inhumans were not created as replacements for the X-Men. That came about much later as a result of Fox making the movies. They were created by Stan and Jack as supporting characters in the Fantastic Four, and they were kick-ass. Come on, guys. Well, Mike G, that is true. But what we were talking about is when Marvel was bought by Disney, the Inhumans were going to be their answer to the X-Men because they didn't own the rights to the X-Men. So we weren't saying that. You're talking about the actual lineage and the origins of the Inhumans in the comic Marvel universe. When we were talking about the Inhumans being made to replace the X-Men, we were talking about specifically in the Marvel Cinematic Universe before Disney bought Fox and acquired the X-Men back. And that's what we meant. But you're absolutely right about what you were saying. So, but when we're talking about it, because that was the plan, the Inhumans movie was going to get made as part of Marvel's plans, but they had to scuttle that movie when it was decided when they made the Inhumans TV show, and we all know how that worked out. But it was, what a bummer. But so that's what we need. Renee Scarlett is going to end this mailbag. Renee Scarlett says, "Hi guys, I know you have a huge watch list, but I wanted to recommend Mass if you've not already seen it. Not a fun watch, but the performances are amazing, and I'm still thinking about it weeks later. Thank you for all that you do." Isn't Mass the story like the family, like one family caused the death of another family's son? I'm not sure about Mass, but if you recommend it, that was kind of vaguely on my radar. I absolutely would like to see that. Look, I'll watch anything that's good. So it's important when you viewers send in recommendations like this so we can bring it to the attention of not just ourselves, but to the rest of the community here. So, Renee Scarlett, thank you for that recommendation.
Hey guys, we want to take a second and thank the sponsor of this video, Harry's. Now, take a look at me. When is the last time you saw me have this close and smooth of a shave? The answer is never, because I haven't been using the Harry's starter set until now. Using Harry's, I have gotten the most comfortable, smoothest shave that I've had in years, and that's no exaggeration. And right now, Harry's is giving their best offer to our viewers and listeners. First-time Harry's customers can redeem a starter set for just $3 at harrys.com/Campea. That includes a 5-blade cartridge, a weighted handle, foaming shave gel, and a travel cover to protect your blades on the go. That's a $13 value, all for just $3. Seriously, guys, why pay so much more for other products when Harry's prioritizes simple, quality craftsmanship at a fair price? And it is time to move on from blades that barely hold up, because with Harry's, guys who've tried it say that their 8th shave is just as sharp as their first. And you're going to have a really hard time finding other competitors that have a satisfaction rating as high as Harry's. And they're still offering a no-risk trial. You don't like your shave? No problem. It's on them. New look, same incredible offer. There's really never been a better time to give Harry's a try. Just go to harrys.com/Campea today and get your starter set for just $3. That's harrys.com/Campea.
Shaun of the Dead, one of my favorite zombie movies of all time, says, using current or upcoming heroes, which sounds better for the next team-up movie? Avengers, Ant-Man, Wasp, White Vision, Spectrum, Black Knight, and Cersei or Justice League, Shazam, Supergirl, Blue Beetle, Green Lantern, Batgirl, and Wonder Woman or Aquaman. Ooh, that's interesting. You know what? As an old school Justice League fan, I'm going to go with your lineup for Justice League because we know more. Well, we haven't seen The Flash, so we don't know about Supergirl. Actually, you know, these are all speculative. I'm going to go with Justice League, if only because I've always loved Shazam. Actually, Captain Marvel, that's no longer called that because of Marvel. He's Shazam now. I'm going to go with your JLA lineup. I hope you approve of my decision. Miguel Velasquez sends in a tip and says, hello, John and or Rob. Well, it's me. After watching Doctor Strange 2, I got the urge to rewatch the Evil Dead trilogy. My question is, 1 is a standalone and 2 is a reboot that connects with Army of Darkness. Why did they reset it? A good question, Miguel. And I have to say, I actually have a screen credit in Army of Darkness. You can see my name in the end credits. But I think here's the thing. The first Evil Dead was a groundbreaking, very indie horror film made by essentially college students. It had wit, it had verve, and it also had Stephen King talking about how Sam Raimi was the new face of horror and the Evil Dead was something that everybody should see. The thing is, not many people saw it. And then, of course, I think it was Dino De Laurentiis through his company DEG, De Laurentiis Entertainment Group, released through Universal. They made Evil Dead 2 Dead by Dawn. So basically in that film, they just figured no one saw the original Evil Dead, even on home video, because it was such a low-budget indie film. So they basically, at the beginning of Evil Dead 2, they retell the first Evil Dead in the first 15 minutes. But it's just between Ash and his girlfriend. The friends aren't there. And then we're off to the races. And Evil Dead 2 has a much more comedic, horrific bent to it. The first one, while you might laugh at it, it was played pretty straight, and it's pretty ferocious, and it's a great, I think it's a great low-budget horror film, and it really shows where Sam Raimi began, and you can see a lot of the techniques he pioneered that he used in Doctor Strange, The Multiverse of Madness. But then the third Evil Dead movie was supposed to be called originally Medieval Dead, which I thought was cheeky. Of course, the Universal executives are like, nobody knows this franchise. You have to call it something else. So they ended up calling it Army of Darkness. And they even reshot the ending. There's 2 endings to Army of Darkness, which you can see on many of the videos that have been released in the past, probably on YouTube as well. But so the first Evil Dead was unto itself. Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn, sort of replayed Evil Dead 1 because they figured nobody knew Evil Dead 1, and then they played out the rest of the film. So Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness work together, and Evil Dead 1 is kind of an outlier. And then, of course, there's the TV series, Ash versus the Evil Dead. It's just, there's so much dead going on, it's hard to keep it straight. But a good question. Jerome says, oh, wait, stay sweaty for Schnepp. You know what? John Schnepp would have been 55 years old this coming Monday. So this is a good question to remember him by. Stay sweaty for Schnepp sends in a tip and says, hey, John, would you ever consider doing a movie club episode for 2017's Logan? This year is the film's 5th anniversary. Anyway, just a suggestion. I don't know if anyone else has mentioned it yet. Keep up the good work, folks, and stay sweaty. Listen, stay sweaty for Schnepp. First of all, thank you for recognizing the late, great John Schnepp, a good friend to both John and myself. John has said many times that Logan is one of his very favorite comic movies. I love it as well. I think it's a terrific Even if you didn't know anything about the X-Men, it's a terrific film. James Mangold did a wonderful job directing it. I could definitely see that. If we continue on the movie club, we need more of you to watch it, so tell your friends. If we continue on, then we absolutely probably will get around to doing Logan, because it's one of the finest comic book films of all time. So yeah, I think we might. Jerome says, do you think superhero stories have used the plot device of villain wants to use or steal another character's powers too much? Or are there other plot devices you think they use more than this one? Well, stealing powers, I mean, who doesn't want to have powers? So I think it's a comic book trope that's been used in comic books themselves for a long time. So it makes sense that that it comes over into the movies. I think though that the most overused trope is the villain that wants to take over the world. I mean, think about it. Like, let's say you took over the world. Are you gonna fix people's plumbing? Or are you gonna pay for their kids' education? I would think taking over the world would be a big pain in the ass. Like, you'd have to take care of everyone. How are you gonna supply chain problems that we have today? If you were the master of the world, if Victor Von Doom took over the world, do you think that he would want to be dealing with getting stuff to your local grocery store? I don't think so, man. I mean, he wouldn't want the trains to run on time. I mean, he would have someone else do it. I think taking over the world is kind of not what villains should be doing. But that's just me. But that would be the trope that I would say is overused the most. Because what are you going to do with it? Dirt on my boot. Dirt on my boot. I loved Doctor Strange too, but just scrolling through the comments for Campea videos, people keep calling it the multiverse of mid, or saying Marvel is all mid now. I get it's their opinion, but where did this childish phrase of calling things mid come about? Well, I think you nailed it. It's a childish phrase. I think it's uncreative. You know, everybody wants to make fun of things or truncate things and make them too short. I think multiverse of madness, just say it out loud. Multiverse of madness. Doesn't that roll off the tongue? Doesn't that it makes me feel good when I say it. It's exciting. I don't want to say multiverse of mid. What does that mean? Is that like Midgard? That's our Earth is Midgard if you're a Thor fan. Mid, what does that mean? Middle of the road, mid-sentence, multiverse of mid. I don't like it. I think people shouldn't use it. I want to hear you say the whole thing. Say it all. Multiverse of madness. Back on the lunchbox. That's a good name. I like that. Did Wanda know when White Vision flew away that it had downloaded Vision's memories? As far as she knew, her Vision was made up in Westview. As far as anyone knows, Vision died in Infinity War. So I don't understand why everyone is asking where Vision was in Multiverse of Madness. Listen, I agree with you. I've been reading this criticism for days now. Wanda thinks Vision's dead. White Vision is not Vision, according to her. And she already created a fake Vision for herself that she lost again. I think the last thing in the world she wants to do is find some other bastardized version of the entity she loves in Vision. That's why we don't see him. There's no reason to have White Vision there, because I think Wanda in her mind rejects that that's Vision at all. And I think of everything that she did, perhaps recreating the Vision, because the Vision was real. According to Wanda, her kids were always part of her imagination, but Vision was real, and essentially she resurrected him from beyond the grave. That might even be worse than creating fake kids. So perhaps as she tried to get herself together and delve into the mysteries of the Darkhold, that she probably stayed away from doing something that was that creepy. So Dr. J says, hey guys, David Zaslav has balls of iron, but are they manscaped? The Axeman will cut Ezra Miller like a bad habit and redirect finance from canceled projects to reshoot The Flash, no matter the expense. He'll then resurrect Superman, Green Lantern, and Cyborg. Fear the Axe. Well, As we found out today, if you're reading the trades, many shows, Naomi that was on the CW after one season got canceled. Dynasty after 5 seasons got the axe. Legends of Tomorrow already got the axe. I mean, David Zaslav is wielding the axe like the Frank Frazetta painting of the Death Dealer that's on the cover of that Molly Hatchet album. He knows what he's doing. And I don't know if he's going to redirect all those funds to reshoot The Flash with someone other than Ezra Miller. But you know what? He's a dangerous, dangerous man, and there is blood in the water. But who knows what he'll do next? Paul C., 1 of 5. Paul, you're a madman. Hi, John. I hope your day is going well. Question, if Discovery decided to reboot Superman, what would be the point of Snyder's vision to keep and those to improve or change according to you? For me, the main point is to keep the desire to tackle real-world issues in a serious and entertaining way. Hunger in the world, ecology, racism, overpopulation, mass unemployment, betrayal, etc., and also the will to offer epic action scenes. The points to change would be, firstly, Donner's legacy, which consists of saying that Clark became Superman after discovering Jor-El in his fortress. The origins need to be more Kent-centric and the modern age inspired. Clark is the main persona. Also, leave the poor Jonathan alive, for God's sake. I've seen him die more times than Uncle Ben or the Waynes, while his death in Clark's younger years hasn't been canonical since 1986. Not to mention that having 2 parents is rare among superheroes. And second, address the real-world issues I talked about, but highlight them with meta-human enemies in the first movies, Parasite, Metallo, Livewire, Riot, etc., so that we can identify, and also so that Metropolis becomes a character in its own right. Well, Paul, you should be a development executive. I mean, you just laid out a very specific path forward for Superman. All good ideas. I don't necessarily disagree with your ideas. I like the ideas. I think one of the great things about Superman and Lois is seeing 2 parents, a loving mother and father, even though one of the parents is Superman. It's nice seeing a functioning family that loves one another dealing with their teenage sons. I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea, but here's what I think the problem with Superman is. When you're making a Superman movie, it's very hard to give him an antagonist. The reason Man of Steel, I think, works so well is because you have Zod, who is a Kryptonian, who is equally matched with Superman. I think it's very hard. Like Lex Luthor is a human being. Unless you give him that famous green armored suit from the comics, how does Lex Luthor become a formidable opponent to Superman? I think it's hard, and you can't using magic makes it too fantastical. And whether it's Metallo, I mean, he's dangerous because there's kryptonite inside of him. I just think it's really hard to make a Superman. On one hand, you want him to be human, you want him to interact with the real world, and at the same time, he's still Superman. So how do you reconcile those two things? How do you make it work? And I think the biggest problem, the reason we haven't had a Superman movie since our beloved Henry Cavill starred Man of Steel, and then, of course, Zack Snyder's Dawn of Justice and Justice League, is because that is hard. What story do you want to tell? On one hand, you want to humanize Clark, you want to humanize Superman, but on the other hand, you want him to kick ass and punch people in the face like he can do that to Zod through buildings and have that kind of action. It's hard. Now, you just laid out a really interesting path forward, but it's very specific. How do you make your suggestions work in a 2.5 hour or 2 hour movie and service all of those ideas at once? It's really hard to do. But I would say that you did a really good job of laying out a path forward. I would watch the Superman movie you suggested. I just don't know how easy that would be to do in a motion picture context. Taylor sends in a tip, part 1. Hey, John and crew, big fan. Keep up the great work. I think the urgency for the recast of The Flash is that at the end of the movie, when Barry returns from Flashpoint, a new actor as Barry will in fact be revealed. Maybe a consequence of Flashpoint. This way, lots of reshoots are not required, and Warner Brothers gets to move on from Ezra, and we're to meet our new Flash going forward. In the comics and in the CW, things change after Flashpoint, so that might be a good solution to all, and it fits with the story still. Here's the thing, Taylor. Movies are different than TV, and movies are obviously different than comics. And the thing is, they've invested, I don't know what the actual budget to Flash is, but you're looking at somewhere between $150 and $200 million in terms of budget. And then, of course, you have the P&A and the marketing money, which can double that. If the film is successful, they're not going to want to get rid of Ezra Miller. As John always says on this show, winning cures everything. And we don't know. I would suspect there's more going on in Ezra Miller's life than we have been privy to sitting here on the sidelines. And I think Warner Brothers might have some insight into what's actually going on. I don't think they're going to reshoot the film. I think that Ezra Miller is going through something. I think the studio might be aware of that. And we have more than a year before the new Flash movie comes out. Things could change. Let's see how they do, because again, I can't speak to that. I don't have all the details. Anonymous sends in a tip. Hi, guys. My question is for Rob. Oh, I'm here. Hey. Have got quite a few Spider-Man hot toys in my collection. Nicely done. I do too. However, I've moved into a new place where the temperature is going to be quite hot and worried they might be damaged from the heat. Should I be worried? Thanks. I'm not going to lie to you. Yes, you should. The Spider-Man suits, the classic suit, the 2099 suit, the suits that have kind of that neoprene costume stuff, the Amazing Spider-Man 2 figures, they are susceptible to being hurt in the heat. I mean, I would keep them. You don't want, if the temperature in your place is going to go beyond 100 degrees, you should watch out. Kind of keep them, like anything else, in a cool, dry place. I mean, obviously this summer is going to be a very hot summer. Just be careful where you keep them. But as long as they're not in the direct sunlight, I really haven't had a problem with my hot toys being, I have no problem bringing these hot toys here because they're completely, it's cool in here and they're out of any kind of direct sunlight. You should be okay. But kudos to your Spider-Man collection. Jerome says, would you consider Game of Thrones and the Marvel Cinematic Universe similar, since both focus on several characters on personal journeys who are eventually brought together by a bigger threat? Thanos, the Night King, and both have characters with the last name of Stark. Well, I never thought of that, Jerome, but I think what you're describing is a lot of fantasy fiction, science fiction, fantasy, and horror. I mean, I can see how you're drawing the parallels there. I wouldn't say that they're different because, or I would say that they are different because in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you have a collection of characters, are heroes that all are essentially teamed up to accomplish one goal, whether it's to put a suit of armor around the world or save the world from Thanos. They're of one mind. They know what they need to do. Whereas on Game of Thrones, there are multiple factions all vying for the throne, for the Iron Throne, to go to King's Landing and win the Game of Thrones. So there's not a lot of cooperation there. There are different factions, and even though we love the Starks, it's a family. It's not just, the Stark family was a family, of course, but now we're looking at only Tony, and then, of course, Tony and Pepper later. But I think it's a little different. It's not exactly the same, although I like the parallels that you draw. Jerome also, he goes on to say, also, do you think Phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe has done some of the same problems people had with final seasons of Game of Thrones? Examples, rushed plots, drastic character changes, logic problems, too much fan service, etc. For me, the biggest problem with Game of Thrones, the 8th season, was the fact that it was rushed. I still don't understand why there was only 6 episodes. They certainly had enough story where they could expand it and extend it more. I think one of that's what I think the big problem with the 8th season was. And they did things like
the distance between places they got rid of. And the reality of the land, the reality of Westeros was changed. Like, for instance, when Robert Baratheon in the first season of Game of Thrones goes to Winterfell, goes from King's Landing to Winterfell, a big point is made. It took him a month. Him and his giant entourage, it took them a month to go on horseback and cart from King's Landing to Winterfell. It's a long way. In the latter seasons of Game of Thrones, when I forget, I believe it's the 7th season, when they're fighting the hordes beyond the wall of the dead, the White Walkers, they're all trapped on that little island surrounded by water with all the dead out there. They like have somebody run back to Castle Black, send a raven to Dragonstone, and it gets to Dragonstone, and then Dany comes back on a dragon and saves them all, and this happens like in a night, in an afternoon. That's a long journey. I was like, come on, man. They couldn't make that journey, and that they would have all died. And I think that's what happened. They were in too much of a rush to get someplace. And I think that they were missing. There were a lot of, with Phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we've been given a lot of interesting things. Shang-Chi I loved. So did John. I really liked Eternals. I think John liked Eternals as well. But these things are disparate and disconnected. Whereas when we first started watching the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you knew that Iron Man would lead to Thor, would lead to Captain America, would lead to the Avengers. And each thing, even from the very first movie, built on the others and was building this, I forget about the Incredible Hulk too, was building this tapestry. And I feel that in Phase 4, everything feels isolated. And even Spider-Man No Way Home leaned back into the Raimi Spider-Verse and not so much into the greater Marvel Cinematic Universe, even though Doctor Strange was there. Once that movie was over, we're left not knowing where Peter Parker is in terms of the rest of the MCU, but I just think it's not the same. I think it's different. I think it's different. Jerome goes on to say, should directors who are going to make a movie or TV show in a cinematic universe be obligated to watch the previous entries? Like, for example, Sam Raimi apparently didn't watch all of WandaVision before making Doctor Strange 2. Well, look, if I was Kevin Feige and I was hiring directors, I would say that the more information the directors have about what came before would allow them to do their jobs better. It surprises me to know that Sam Raimi didn't watch all of WandaVision. I think he absolutely should have. Now, perhaps he wanted to keep things surprising for himself, and that was part of his process. But I think you'd have to know what happened in WandaVision because it so informs Doctor Strange that it seems like I keep hearing people say this. I have not read this article or wherever it was reported. I mean, if he actually said this in an interview, I'd like to read it. But if I was Kevin Feige, I'm like, Sam, first of all, the show's great. We're really proud of it. It's only like 4 hours long or something, 5 hours long. Please do that. Take half a day before you start. Watch all the episodes so you know where you're at. That's what I would think. Dylan's bad movie takes. Dylan's, you need an apostrophe between N and S in Dylan's. Make it possessive. What's up, everybody? This year I've been going through the Fast and the Furious anthology, and I found my new favorite film in Too Fast, Too Furious. Dude, come on. Not The Drift. Too Fast, Too Furious. But you know what? Movies are subjective, so to each their own. I think it's dated, cheesy, but a whole lot of fun to watch. Are there movies like this for you all? Yeah. Fast and Furious 3, Tokyo Drift. But I mean, you got hot Asian girls, you got cool Asian cars drifting through parking structures, drifting around mountains. You've got Yakuza. I mean, there's nothing, and you've got Han, the introduction of Han, one of the greatest characters in the history of movies, with the greatest hair, and he also has the greatest snacks he's always eating, and the greatest cars. I mean, it's the next movie, Too Fast, Too Furious. Oh, wait, Ray Aura has something to say. They also had cameos. That's true. They had cameos. Vin Diesel shows up at the end. That's good. Is your mic on? Can they hear you say that? Your mic's not on? All right. Well, all right. Ray Orr's mic is not on. But you know what? I mean, there are other movies. Like, I often bring up a film that I talk about. It's from 1985. It is a teen, I wouldn't call it a teen comedy because it's not. It's a teen angst movie that wants to be a gang movie from 1952 by way of 1985. And it stars James Spader, Ultron, and Robert Downey Jr. It's called Tough Turf, and tough is spelled Tuff. Why? I don't know. Maybe because the kids aren't educated in the movie, but it's not good. And it was directed by Fritz Kirsch, who directed Children of the Corn. I love this movie. I even have a giant French movie poster for this movie. As a matter of fact, I should get it framed and bring it into the studio and hang it right over there. I'm sure John would love that. But it's not a great movie. But it's cheesy, good fun. And one of the show-stopping scenes, it even stars Kim Richards, the little girl from Escape to Witch Mountain. And then she became one of the housewives of Beverly Hills. And I don't know why I love it so much, but I love it. And it's actually better than Too Fast, Too Furious. Just saying. Thor Jingles. Hey, John and or Rob. Had a couple of movie club suggestions, and if not, maybe just a quick thought on each. The Secret Life of Walter Mitty and American Psycho. Couple of my favorites. Now, I bet you're talking about the remake of The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, which I believe stars Ben Stiller. Help me out. I've not seen the remake. I've only seen the original, which I liked. But I heard The Secret Life of Walter Mitty is pretty good. And American Psycho, starring the great Christian Bale. I love American Psycho. I love it. I read the novel. I love the movie and everything about the movie. I love it when the you can watch this on YouTube. The scene with the business cards is great, but Christian Bale is fantastic in the film. I actually have to find it in my move. I actually have a T-shirt for the restaurant Dorsia that they're always talking about in the movie that nobody can get a reservation to. That's a deep cut. One day I'll wear it on this show. But I love me some American Psycho. Jake sends in a tip and says, "Hey, John, I was wondering if it's necessary to see the first Top Gun before seeing the sequel. You guys are awesome. Thanks." It's not necessary, but I think that you should. I think that if you've never watched Top Gun, first of all, you're going to look back on it. It's cheesy fun. It's definitely one of the great 80s artifact movies. I would say that there are certain movies that really exemplify the 80s more than any other movies. Top Gun is one of them. Lost Boys is one of them. John Hughes movies, whether it's Pretty in Pink or Ferris Bueller's Day Off, very 80s. Valley Girl, the Nicolas Cage movie Valley Girl. Fast Times at Ridgemont High. But Top Gun is peak MTV, when MTV was ruling the airwaves and music videos. So many filmmakers got their start doing music videos. Tony Scott was Ridley Scott's brother. He'd made a feature film in 83 called The Hunger that starred David Bowie and Catherine Deneuve, which is one of my favorite vampire movies of all time. But Top Gun, when you watch it, it is peak 80s. But what's really interesting is, I haven't done this, but I would be curious. Go see Top Gun, but watch the original Top Gun before you go see Top Gun Maverick. Watch them on the same day. So it's like, you're watching 2 episodes of your favorite show, and you get to see the first season and then the concluding season all in one day. I think that would be a really interesting experience. Listen to your Uncle Bob here. Do that, and now report back and tell me what you felt about all of it after it happened. You know what? I'm going to do that now, I think. David D. says, "I just wanted to say you guys are the best." Well, what can I say? I won't argue with you. "I've been dealing with AP exams for the past 2 weeks, so watching your show every day has helped me settle down and relax after all the stress. Have a great day, guys." Well, first of all, congratulations on getting through your AP exams. I hope everything is working out for you and they will lead you down the path that you want to go. But it's our privilege, and we appreciate that the entertainment. I mean, John runs a tight ship, and he does a really good job. His primary concern is providing the best experience for you, the viewers, as he can. That whether we're in a studio, whether he's got cameras shooting at 60 60 frames per second, whether he's got great, look at the lighting. Look at the lighting behind me. That's all John Campea. And if you are getting something out of it, that makes us all happy. So congratulations. I hope you aced those AP tests. Capri Grant sends in one of two. Hey guys, so I wanted to address some things regarding what was discussed in today's show. After Kevin's promotion to a Kennedy kind of role at Marvel, ooh, I like that, Kennedy, movies, comics, shows, etc., producer Brad became head of the shows and Alonzo head of animation. So while Kevin has his hand in every production, he has been delegating significantly like a leader should. As far as Rob's question, the MCU is building towards Secret Wars 2015. Comics Explained has an amazing video covering it. Well, listen, I would tend to, I'm very aware of that fact. And look, Kevin Feige has always delegated well. As a matter of fact, look at his choice for directors. I mean, he picks directors like the Russo brothers, like James Gunn, that haven't had the kind of opportunities, and he works in partnership with them. He wants them to bring their certain speciality, like James Gunn's sensibility to create something like the Guardians, or the Russo brothers bringing that Michael Mann vibe to Captain America and the Winter Soldier. And with Louis D'Esposito and Victoria Alonso, they have been a team. And that's, like you said, that's what a great leader does. So I think absolutely. But as far as building towards Secret Wars, that's what it appears that they are doing. But they haven't announced that yet. It seems the obvious choice with all the multiversal stuff going on. And Comics Explained does a really good job. I haven't watched that particular video, but they haven't announced that yet. And I feel like there's a reason why they haven't announced it. It seems, remember, if there's anything fans can do, it's speculate about where the MCU is going. And a lot of the time, we're not right. Because, remember those heady days when Mephisto was going to be in WandaVision? Didn't work out that way. But I agree with you. I think Kevin Feige is a great leader, and leaders know how to delegate. Capri Grant goes on to say, also, as far as Celestials and Pantheons go, I think Rob is kind of putting the cart before the horse. I'm sure Marvel will address it, but it's going to take time unless you just want Kevin Feige to make a 10-minute video explainer. Avengers 5 should chart our course. Well, Capri Grant, that's true, but here's my question. When a Celestial cracks open from the bottom of the ocean and comes out and gets frozen, a giant Celestial, and is in the ocean, and then you see Arishem the Judge come down, who's 10 times the size of the Earth and is speaking to humanity. What happens to humanity? And then we see warring gods in Egypt, right outside of Cairo, eating the souls of human beings. I mean, what I want to know is, how does this affect, like what kind of news reports? If you go to church after a Celestial comes to Earth, what do you ask pastor? If you go to confession, if you're a Catholic, and you say, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I saw a Celestial in the sky and I realized my life is meaningless, so I'm just going to sin until I can sin no more. I mean, how does the people of the world deal with that? And that's what I'm interested in, the cosmology of it all. We've got Egyptian gods, we've got the Eternals, we've got Thanos. And remember, people have already come back after the snap. So humanity has to be in a bit of a shambles. So I want to know what they're thinking. So I need to know, as an audience member, what's going on. And I think the world would need to know that too. But a good question. I mean, maybe they're going to do Avengers 5, and yes, but up right now, I want to know what's going on in the universe. Mark Nadeau sends in a tip and says, seems to me that both James Cameron and Tom Cruise are almost competing in the innovations of movies. Both are pushing envelopes. Your thoughts? Well, that's a great observation, Mark. I would say this. I mean, Tom Cruise is competing against himself. He's trying to provide a great experience for the audience by giving them something they haven't seen before. Stunts that are real, everything done in camera. So that Tom Cruise himself is on the highway to the danger zone, pushing the envelope, going faster and farther than Tom Cruise has ever gone before. James Cameron is doing something different. While he is creating technology that he is using, the technology that he's pioneering is trickling down through the rest of Hollywood to be used by anyone who chooses to pick up those tools and see how far they can take the movie industry. And so I think Tom Cruise is taking himself front and center and allowing the audience to live vicariously through him, whereas James Cameron is pushing the envelope in order to make the technology of filmmaking. He uses it first. He carries the torch. He blazes the way. But then everybody, all filmmakers, can choose to use to utilize what James Cameron has made. So James Cameron is doing something for the whole industry. Tom Cruise is pretty much working for the audience. And I think that's the difference. But they both do incredible work, and I'm so there for it. And it'll be a sad day when both Tom Cruise and James Cameron are not pushing the envelope. I mean, Tom Cruise, I thought James Cameron would beat Tom Cruise to space, but Tom Cruise is going to go to space and make a movie. That's pretty amazing. Well, it looks to me, kids, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, kind souls, gentle beings, across the 28 known galaxies, this is a mailbag for May 11th and May 12th for the John Campea Show. I'm your host, Robert Meyer Burnett. If you don't find me on the John Campea Show every day during the week or on these mailbags, you can find me on Twitter at BurnettRM, find me on Instagram at RMBurnett, or on my own YouTube channel at the Post Geek Singularity, or TikTok, or my website. Find me there. And remember, if you want to have your question read on these mailbags, find the link down below. Anytime, day or night, 7 days a week, send us in a tip and a question. And if we deem your question or tip or comment or whatever appropriate, well, then we'll read it here on the mailbag. I want to give you all a special thanks from everyone here at the John Campea Show, John himself, Chris, Aaron, Ray Ora, and of course, fact checker Jonathan, who is now producer Jonathan. And thank you from all of us.